Well, welcome back to the old Loomis channel again. I'm still working on this Small Sun ZY-T08 mod, and I've decided that I really cannot deal with that stock switch if I'm going to be doing 8, 9, 10 amps power. I just don't want to do it because it's just looking as a failure, and the springs are very weak on this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mod using one of the Judco 10 amp push button switches. Okay, it's quite a bit larger than the stock switch, quite a bit larger, but I figured out what I need to do. I just need to make a spacer. I just needed to raise the tail cap as it sits on the body there, in the back of the body. I just need to raise that up. Okay, so I've made my measurements and figured out my dimensions, and I'm making a copper spacer. I think I showed a still picture of everything, but I'm using copper couplings again that I've sliced and then flattened out, split and then flattened out, and I have 5 pieces of copper coupling, of the flat copper that are soldered together in all their ugliness when they're first done. What I've used for a pattern is I've used the rubber gasket that fits, in between the original tail cap piece and the body. The gasket fits on that tail cap piece, so it's a great pattern for doing my cutting here and shaping. But I don't want to ruin it. And the other thing about rubber is it's sort of hard to keep the rubber in place when you try to like mark a line across the edge of it, because just it moves real easy. So what I did was I put double-sided tape down on the copper, and then I laid the gasket on top of it so the gasket doesn't move around, and that way I could get my dimensions on the copper, and I made some did some cuts with a pair of shears to get it to this point. Now from here I will work use my coarse file to work some of this down a little bit, and then I'll end up on the end mill, end mill, it's my end mill, the drill press, with a bit from a, comes right off my tip of my tongue right there, Dremel bit, and work it down some more, and then I'll probably end up with a sanding wheel off a Dremel, sanding the little sanding drum to do the final touches. Anyways, I marked this. I cut the tape away around the outer edge and inside, and I did it with an X-Acto knife, and that allows it and I also marked with a marker. So I have a Black Magic marker, but when that's gone, there will be an actual etching scratch, from using the X-Acto knife, so that when I lose the marker, I'll still have my marks there where it's got to be. I also have the 4 holes marked. That'll be the 4 holes that have to go through here. 6 millimeter thick is what I came up with, and the tail cap button, the switch button, I have to take that out, because you see it's got the rubber piece in the center that pushes against the old switch. Well, I need to cut that down. Okay. Then I'm also going to have to drill in these holes in the tail piece, the tail cap. I'm going to have to drill those down deeper so that the screws are set in farther, so that they'll go through the whole piece all together. Okay. I also have to cut out the center, and I'll do that by drilling as large as I can, which the biggest drill I have is a 1/2 inch. So I'll do it that far with a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to have to use a Dremel and my cutters to cut the rest of the way around that circle, because it needs to be hollow so that the switch can go inside. Now that will clear that switch. But the problem, then the next problem is, okay, the switch has got contacts on both on the same end, so I'm going to have to figure that out too. And what I'm probably going to do is I've done a mod to one of these switches before, where I turned it into basically a square switch, and I'll probably do that again. That way I could have the switch setting this way and just run the contacts, you know, run off the contacts one way and the other, and just use wires or something like that. I'll remove the stock springs. I have heavier duty springs that I will be using on that contact plate. So I have quite a lot to do there, and I'm going to work on it and try to get this whole tail end finished up. Okay, as I said, I started with a file to get some of the really rough areas off this thing, and then I went to the Dremel bit that I have and started smoothing it off and taking shape, and then I used the sanding wheel on the drill press. I'm at a loss for words, can you believe that? And got to where I finished it out, and it fits in snug. It's not perfect, but it is the space that I needed to fill in and the lift I needed. And then all I got to do now is work on the center hole and the 4 holes for the screws. Okay, so back at this thing, I went ahead and drilled a bunch of holes, smaller holes, all the way around the outer edge of where I wanted the inner hole, and then just used the Dremel to cut through the little spaces in between so I could knock the plug out. And then I started working with the Dremel bit in the drill press, and finally the sander in the drill press, and it works. I mean, it's on there, and if I put the body in here and get it all together, that'll give you an idea of what it'll do. I mean, it won't be as noticeable as you'd think, plus it'll be fairly shiny. But now I still have to drill the 4 holes here for the screws, and then drill down farther in here for the head, so the head's going deeper so that the whole screw overall is long enough. But it's getting pretty close anyways, and I just wanted to show you where I was in the steps. All I got to do is do the 4 holes, and this will be done, and then just finish that off. So it won't be too long. Okay, we're back at this this tail cap and switch and all that. I got the whole tail cap part finished as far as the spacer, the copper spacer, and I don't think I showed, but I drilled and bored these down deeper so I could put the screws in, and still reach and tighten in. So all that's all done. The rubber boot has to have the center removed. Okay, so all I would do is just take and flip it inside out, and then I can trim off that center section with a pair of shears, or even a razor blade knife. And shear that right off, and then flip it back in, and then that'll be all done. I've taken apart the Judco switch. There's 2 pieces to the Judco switch housing, and there's like 8 pins, plastic pins that keep it all together when they're pressed together. So I just pry along the edge. I start with a razor blade knife and go all along the edge and just pry a little bit, and then I work my way around with a very thin screwdriver and pry a little bit until I pop it off evenly, because if you pop it off at an angle, it breaks the pins. But this is the guts inside. You have a spring in there. I'll hang on a second. I just drop it all out of there. You have the mechanism for the push button, the clicky. You have the two contacts, copper contacts, right here. Okay, and then you have the stem, or whatever you want to call it. You can call it the bell, or you can call it the whatever you want to call it. That's the center section that's spring loaded. Okay, those are all solid copper, and I need to this is the stock switch, and you can see the difference in size between a stock switch and a Judco switch. So it's going to be interesting. I believe it'll fit, but what I'm going to have to do with the Judco is I'm going to have to cut this front section off so that the switch is square. So I'll be removing this front section here so that I have basically a square switch when I'm done. If you cut off just in front of where the 4 pins are, okay, and just cut that straight off, or I'll probably file it straight off. I might try cutting on both halves, then it's still functional. Okay, you can still put everything back together, you can still put the halves back together, and it's still a functional switch, but it makes it more of a square switch, and I think that will fit, will fit in this section here. What I'm planning on doing is one contact I'll hook directly to this side. To get to this side, because both my contacts are facing in one direction, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to take and solder a wire in here, run it over, and before it gets to this point, I'm going to drill through and run the wire in and have it come up the other side, where I can put it right at the other switch contact. I'm going to see if I can do that. I'm not sure I can, but I'll find out. Anyways, that's the next in the process, is getting that switch assembly to where it'll work. Okay, well, I've been working on this switch here off and on for a couple hours now, trying to work everything out. What I've done is I have the switch epoxied onto the contact plate, and then the wires are 18 gauge, just 18 gauge wire, and I drilled a hole through each one of the center of each one of the springs, and ran the wire through the contact plate, bent it over and soldered it directly to the spring, then bent it over and soldered it directly to the contact of the switch. Okay, so the wire goes from like this one goes from the switch all the way around the side of the switch, down through the contact plate, and then bent over and wired directly through, or directly to the spring. Now, also inside the springs is the copper braid, okay, and then on the very top I've soldered 2 copper discs for contact points for the batteries. I think it ought to be able to pull the amperage without a problem, and I still have plenty of room in there. When I put it all in, it fits in fine, and when I put in the copper insert that was in here, there's plenty of room, no problem at all. Put the top on there, and perfect fit. So all I got to do is screw all that together, and then I can go ahead and get the driver done, and we'll be ready to go. Okay, well, we're back to the pill again, and I used Arctic aluminum adhesive to put the star onto the pill, or on, you know, the copper pill that was put inside it. And I ended up taking these copper tabs that I had on here, taking them off and putting the wires down below them, or as much as below as I could, so that they set as level as I could get to try to keep the reflector down as low as it can. So now the head, you know, the reflector and lens are back on, and it's just a matter of putting this in and then hooking the driver to the other end. The driver is going to be the this BLF FET driver. I've never worked with it, but we're going to try it out and see what happens. I already have the main wiring done from underneath, and then I just need to hook up the LED wires, and we'll see what happens. Well, to tell you the truth, guys, I can't say that I remember exactly where I was, but I got the driver in today, and it's a FET-based driver, and it was sent to me by another member, and I put it in, and I've got it all set up, and everything works. It's got like 5 modes, I think, but I really can't do any amp draws with it. Anyways, I still got a little cleanup to do, but the driver is simple. I mean, it was just 2 wires to the LED, and then 2 wires for the battery positive and negative. That's the positive side, and that's the negative side. I put a little dot of solder right there, so the negative, they had to stand proud a little bit for the negative, and I'll clean that up, clean up the marks and everything. The rest of it's, it's all done like I showed before. I mean, the switch assembly's all done, and I left the one side of the battery compartment showing the plus, and then the other side I blackened out the plus so that just a minus shows. The problem with this particular one doing this is, you got to know for sure that you don't have the switch turned on. I would feel real bad if you had the switch turned on already and then started screwing it together, because I think it would probably short out. So you need to know that the switch is turned off, which you can check real easy just by checking with a meter right there when you put the batteries in. But needless to say, it's done, and after seeing it, again, MTG2 is not what you use for a thrower. It only reads about 25K lux at 1 meter, whereas the stock light with only 2 amps and an XML read 30K lux, which means that this spot is large and spread out, where a spot on an XML is tighter. That's just the way MTG2s are. It throws a heck of a lot more light overall, but it's not a thrower kind of a light, and I'll do some beam shots with it. If I were to say anything about you guys getting them, I don't know. To me, the easiest way would just be to run like 3 or 4 amps on an XML, an XML2, and leave it parallel, and use a Q-Lite driver with a few extra chips to take it up to 4 amps. Let it go at that, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. You could use the existing star and just reflow the XML2 onto it, and put a couple copper discs in behind that star to make a little bit of heat sink. Let it go at that. It'd be a heck of a lot easier. This was a very hard job to do, and I can't say that I really think it was it's necessary or the greatest way to do it. I think these MTG2s do better in much larger reflectors. I mean, like I say, it's a real bright light, but it's a heck of a lot of work to get there. So anyways, that's about all I got. I'll post this video up with the others, and you know, there's a thread on it so y'all can ask questions about things. Thanks for watching.